I get asked all the time, hey, if I'm going to start in fantasy or I need a book to read, what should I get? Where should I start? And I can point them to a lot of books that I love. But if you're going to start in the fantasy world or kind of want to reboot your entry into the fantasy world, it's always going to be The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. And I know, of course, that's on everybody's lists and the top 10 and all that. But honestly, I think The Hobbit is the foundational fantasy book. And, people can say, well, isn't it Lord of the Rings? Isn't it, Brandon Sanderson's work or Eye of the World? But really, this is written for someone who needs an entryway into Middle Earth to hear about what the Shire is and who hobbits are. It's written for someone to really understand all that's happening and just have this wonderful world building. And so I'm going to talk about why I think The Hobbit is pretty much the foundational fantasy book that should be on everyone's shelf. You can fight me in the streets on it. So why don't we get started? The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien is about Bilbo, this little hobbit who lives in the Shire, and his life is pretty mundane. He has a lot of meals. He smokes a lot of pipes, and that's his day to day. And he's a Baggins, and that's what Baggins are about. They are about just the chill lifestyle. But a part of him is Took. A part of his heritage is about adventure and seeing what the world has to offer. And Gandalf comes around, this wizard, and causes some trouble for Bilbo. And he gets him hired by a band of dwarves who are reclaiming their treasure that Smaug the dragon has taken. They're going to venture up and get that treasure. And they need a burglar. And that burglar is our very own Bilbo Baggins, who he's not a burglar. He just needs an adventure. They call him out and say, hey, you don't really sound like a burglar. You don't seem up to snuff. And he runs in their direction to join them on this journey that's going to take him across Middle Earth to meet elves and men who shapeshift into bears. They're going to meet scoundrels and go on all sorts of adventure. And as you see in this book, Bilbo just gets more miserable and more miserable as his Baggins side starts to hate what he's on, and his Took side is starting to come alive to say, hey, this is also what I'm meant for. This book, where Bilbo becomes this fish out of water, where he has to descend into the caves of goblins and run across other creatures. It is a fantastic book. The reason I think people would like this is, it does start off the Lord of the Rings. He does find the ring from Gollum. He encounters him. He sort of beats him in a riddle battle. And Bilbo just happens to come across the one ring, takes it with him, and uses it a lot. And it's because none of it's malicious, none of it's out of fear. He is there to save his friends. It's out of bravery. And you can talk semantics on why the ring doesn't affect him. He's a hobbit. I don't know. Sauron was up to other things at the time. But I think this is fundamental because it is the archetype of fantasy books for me, because a lot of the fantasy books I write are someone normal had a good way of life and something came in and interrupted it. It happens in all of the books that I really love, like The Eye of the World. All these teenage villagers are doing just fine until they're not. And they have to venture out into the world. Brandon Sanderson's books are about someone with a normal life and someone comes in and interrupts it and blows their life apart to reveal what they're capable of. Whether it's Mistborn or The Way of Kings or Jade City, whatever it is, their world gets interrupted by something and it blows apart. And I just really think this shows that. The other reason I love this is just the world building. It is step by step. Tolkien just parses the world out page by page. He does an info dump on you. He tells you what's going on. What are the elves like? What are the dwarves like? What's Gollum like? The goblins, the eagles, Borin, all of it. And as a writer, I really want to emulate that and not just info dump, #Sanderson on all the things that are happening. Now, I know with Sanderson, this is a little side, but his books are mammoth. So when I see that book, I'm like, all right, I'm going to get a lot of information. This is not that size. I think you would be remiss if you don't have The Hobbit as part of your life. The quotes in here are just fantastic. Mr. Baggins saw how clever Gandalf had been. The interruptions had made Bjorn more interested in the story, and the story had kept them from sending the dwarves off at once, like suspicious beggars. You know, when they finally get to the human town, it's even Bilbo was given a seat at the high table, and no explanation of where he came in, no songs that alluded to him, even in the obscurest way, was asked for in the general bustle. Even then, he manages to stay invisible. A burglar, one who sneaks. There's also, it's in one of the last chapters, "No," said Thorin, "there is more in you of good than you know, child of the kindly West. Some courage and some wisdom, blended in measure. If more of us valued food and cheer and song above hoarded gold, it would be a merrier world." Fun fact, I read The Hobbit every year. I get a new copy. I started with this one, as you can see. It took a beating in my backpack. And I read a chapter a day, starting December 1st. And I just underline it and make notes and passages that I love. And I always get something else out of it. And I think it's a good habit to have, to find a book that you revisit to delve into its depths. And The Hobbit is mine. There's a richness to it, a density in how he describes things. And then, the following year I'll pick up a fresh copy and I do it all again. I compare some of the copies and say, oh, I noticed this last time. I didn't notice this. Oh, I noticed that both times. But it's a good exercise because I think you're a different person every time you pick it up. And when December 1st rolls around, there'll be a fresh copy waiting for me, pen in hand, notebook, and I go over it again. I saddle up with Bilbo and go on that adventure. I really think that The Hobbit is something you should read if you haven't. Maybe you read it back in middle school or in high school, and I think you should pick it up again. I think it should be your December 1st read. Read a chapter a day. It's not too heavy, but you'll finish it pretty quickly. And I think you'll be better for it. And that's about all I have for this one. If you like what I have to say, I would love if you like and subscribe to this. I do a little newsletter, which you can find here, where I just talk about literature and fiction and being a writer and fantasy books that I love. It's short and sweet, sometimes sassy, but I'd love if you join me there. And I'm Ryan McRae. I'm a hope soon to be fantasy writer and voracious reader. And thanks for joining me.